Welcome to the Spiritist Companion Podcast. My name is Yuri Castro, and I'll be your companion on this journey where we study, reflect, and put Spiritist teachings into practice. If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to subscribe to follow so you never miss our weekly episodes released every Monday. Today's theme is a fundamental principle that touches the very heart of our relationship with God, the law of worship. Shall we study? What is the law of worship? Well, in the Spirit's book, Allan Kardec asks in question 649, what does worship entail? And the Spirits are going to teach us that worship is the lifting up of the thought toward God. Through worship, the soul draws near to its Creator, which is an amazing concept for us to think about because we all have thought or the ability to think available to us. So that means that we have at our disposal this ability to draw near to our Creator. And in the question right after that, he asks whether worship is the result of an innate sentiment or the product of education. And they will say an innate sentiment like that of the divinity. The awareness of their weakness leads humans to bow before the one who can protect them. And of course, if we imagine our Creator, if we try to realize how small we are when compared to all beings of creation, of all the universe, of all the planets and everything that's out there, we have the sense of humility. We humble ourselves and we worship the one that's behind everything. So that means also that worship is not limited to outward acts or ritual, but is primarily an inner movement, the sincere elevation of the heart and mind toward the Creator. Allan Kardec further clarifies that true worship is spiritual, arising from love, from reverence, and the recognition of God's greatness. And when it comes to forms of worship, we learn that there are different ways to worship the Creator. In question 654, he asks, does God have any preference for those who worship in this or that manner? And they're going to say, God prefers those who sincerely worship from the bottom of their heart, doing good and avoiding evil, those who think they honor God through ceremonies that do not render them any better than their neighbor. Again, this also sheds some light into the manner. So the manner is sincere worship from the bottom of the heart, and also something else here, doing good and avoiding evil. So that already gives us an idea that there is some sort of action involved behind doing good and avoiding evil. In other words, worshiping God. And then they also ask whether group worship is preferable over individual worship. And they're going to say that those who assemble for communion of thought and sentiment have more power to attract good spirits, and the same applies when they gather to worship God. But do not think that individual worship is therefore less effective, for each individual can worship God with divine thoughts, with prayer, with action. So we learn with the Spirits there are many forms that we can worship God. We can do it through prayer, meaning when we lift our thoughts to God in gratitude or adoration, through work, when every action is done with integrity, love, service, and through charity as well, when we extend God's love to our brothers and sisters in need. Therefore, my dear friends, we learn that worship is not confined to temples or churches or ceremonies. It can and it should be lived in our daily existence through our choices and attitudes. And if we look in our history, we're going to see that the worshiping methods of the past are oftentimes wrong. They even ask whether human sacrifices or animal sacrifices if that didn't originate from a sentiment of cruelty. And the spirits are going to say no, but from a mistaken concept of what was pleasing to God. But we must understand that God never demanded sacrifices, animal or human. God can never be honored by useless destruction of His own creatures, of His own creation. So this was a mistaken concept that we had and we carried for so many centuries, until now we're learning the true ways to worship our Creator. Kardec points out that God values sincerity over appearances. A single prayer that rises, for instance, from the heart in humility and love is worth more than long recitations spoken without thought or feeling. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, especially in chapter 27, Allan Kardec is going to comment on prayer, which is one of the purest expressions of worship. By reading that chapter, we can learn that there are three essential, functions. One is to praise God, so worship in its highest form. Second is to ask for what we need. And third is to give thanks for what we receive. And we can see, my dear friends, how the very structure of prayer reflects the law of worship. First, the recognition of divine greatness. Then, the request of the child, the sons and the daughters of the Creator. And finally, gratitude. We learn that God knows our needs even before we ask, but prayer serves to elevate our thoughts, to strengthen us, to prepare us morally too. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, Jesus says, "I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." But we need to understand here that what God grants to a person who asks with trust, with sincerity, with the heart in the right place is courage, patience, and resignation. God will also grant the means for them to free themselves from their difficulties through ideas that good spirits can inspire, thus leaving them the merit of action. This is something we learn in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 27. So there is this idea that we will receive things when we ask for them in a prayer, but it's going to be courage, patience, resilience, resignation. Those are the things we're going to receive, as well as inspiration from the good spirits who are always ready to help us. But we have, they say, the merit of action. We have free will here that plays a role in us doing our part. God will assist those who help themselves, according to the maxim, help yourself and heaven will help you. Not those who expect everything from outside help without making their own efforts, without trying to work towards that. But most of the time, let's be honest, what people want is to be aided by a miracle without doing anything on their part. The spirits also explain that worship can be both individual and collective. Private worship happens in the silence of the heart in prayer and meditation and this personal dialogue with God, whereas public worship, when sincere, has the purpose of uniting souls in the same sentiment of reverence and fraternity. These public forms of worship oftentimes as well with music. But the spirits warn us that public worship loses its value when it becomes ostentation, routine, or simply some sort of empty repetition. Individually as well, we understand, and this is in Matthew chapter 6, when Jesus said that when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So Jesus here taught us a way to communicate with our Creator, a way to ask in prayer for what we need and put in the effort to receive that. We understand, therefore, my dear friends, that we all have this channel of communication, we all have access. But nowadays, life is so hectic, everything is trying to grab our attention. We don't have much time dedicated to just stopping, being in silence, and praying to God. But we must create those times. And then a practical aspect of this episode here: how can we live this divine law in practice, this law of worship in our daily lives? Well, I brought 3 simple ways that we can do it. 1, elevating our thoughts to God each day, not only in words, but in gratitude and intention. So putting that sentiment, attaching that sentiment to the words whenever we're elevating a thought to our dear Creator. Number 2, to make our actions a form of prayer, a form of worship. So working honestly, serving with love, forgiving when wronged, these things will also work as a way to worship our Creator. So the sentiment, again, behind these outward actions. Number 3 would be to remember that charity is the highest form of worship, because when we love our neighbor, we are loving God. Without charity, there's no salvation. We already had a whole episode on charity and how important it is. And it's impossible to talk about worshiping God without talking about charity and charitable acts. For this, we can also go to Matthew 25 and remember what our dear Master said. And I quote, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Jesus, therefore, is telling us that whatever we do to those who really need it, those brothers and sisters that are in so much need of our help, of our charity, we'll be doing that to Him as well. And by extension, we're doing that to our Creator. It's a way to worship God. And number 4, we can also think about the Creator's work in everything. So we can do a sort of mindful contemplation of nature, of everything that has the Creator's hand. In this way, when we're mindfully observing, admiring, being grateful for that, we will also be worshiping our God. And based on the Gospel according to Spiritism, we can also remember that the main quality of prayer is to be clear, simple, and concise, without useless phraseology. We should not try to speak in a lofty manner, trying to use difficult vocabulary or making it very verbose, thinking that this alone is going to add quality or reach to our prayer. It's not going to. Simple, concise, clear, with the heart and the sentiment in the right place. Those are the important aspects. My dear friends, the law of worship reminds us that God does not need ceremonies, but our hearts. To worship is to live in harmony with His laws, recognizing His presence in every aspect of life and doing our part in the creation as well. As Emmanuel, who wrote through the hands of Chico Xavier, this one is in the book Words of Eternal Life, message number 23, he's going to tell us something that's very beautiful. He's going to say, unquestionably, the loyalty of your faith represents the perfume of joy in your relations with the eternal Lord. But do not forget that your continuous service in the planting and extension of good is the only way in which you can truly serve Him. Bringing to our attention once again the necessity of action. Because as the spirits tell us, the most pleasing worship to God is that which comes from the heart and is expressed in deeds. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode of the Spiritist Companion podcast. If this message inspired you, share it with someone who might also benefit from it. I'll see you next Monday, my dear friends, with another episode. Until then, remain firm with the light of the gospel and with the certainty that true worship connects us more deeply to our Creator. With fraternal love, your Spiritist companion.